welcome to another episode of the Hector and Mike Experience, Common Sense in an Uncommon World. And Mike, we've it's been a little while since we've been done this podcast, about a week or so, and a lot has changed throughout that period of time. Some things for the worse, some things maybe for the better. But looking at it right now, we've got the last flights leading out of Afghanistan. Well, it looks like a lot of people being left behind. We've had the president who's done a press conference in where he made some promises. I like part of his speech. I liked his speech where he made that mention that whoever caused that bombing, they were going to find him, they were going to hunt him down, and they were going to make him pay. But then he kind of continues on for the next sentence or two, and then says, we're not leaving anyone behind, but we're going to work diplomatically if we'd have left people behind. And so I think it's gotten a lot of people confused as to what's really going on with this situation.
How about scared shit? That might be a better way than confused. Imagine if you're there, and this is a true story, you've gone to Afghanistan to see family, they're having a wedding, you're American citizens, you're there, the government collapses, and you can't get out. And you see your president, not of Afghanistan, but your American president on the TV say, we will get everyone out of Afghanistan, all Americans out of Afghanistan, and any Afghanis that want to get out. And then a few days later, we will get as many people out as we can. That's going to make you feel real comfortable and real confident and scare the living bejesus out of you. You said that we've had a lot of change, some good news and bad news. I think I'm interested in the good news because I haven't seen much of it lately. It's been very depressing and very dangerous, what has happened over the course of the last 2 weeks there. A real testament to incompetence of being able to do something or execute something. Even if you take the facts aside of the policy stuff aside, I don't think a lot of people would argue that getting out was the right thing to do. You got to give Joe Biden credit. He was against staying in Afghanistan, even when he was vice president to Barack Obama. He was kind of the canary in the minefield that was saying this is a bad idea. So he kind of has stuck to his guns on all of that. But the execution of it has been dangerous, abysmal, disgusting, pick a name, because it is chaotic. It's not a withdrawal. It's a flat out retreat. It's a flat out surrender. And, they take off today and they're leaving behind who knows how many Americans that are still there. They're basically sentencing the Afghanis that are still there that were helping the Americans to death. I mean, it's not like the political parties where, Democrats fight Republicans, and after the election, sometimes you go out and have a beer and you talk about what happened. I mean, these people, the Taliban, don't take prisoners. And if you've worked with the Americans, you're their opposition. And that doesn't mean that you don't get a federal job someplace. That means they put you in the ground. It is truly a very, very, it was an extremely sad day the other day when those 13 military folks were killed. I mean, just incredibly sad. But it has just been a huge black eye for the United States of America.
And I believe 10 of those Marines were from Camp Pendleton here in California. In addition, I think the tragic part of this whole situation too is, and this started coming out in the news, is that whether it's the Biden administration, because he's in charge, they gave out a list of all the different people that had worked with the United States over to the Taliban, and part of the reason was so that they could try to see if they can get safe passage for these individuals to go to the airport. But in essence, what they gave them is you just gave them a list of everyone who'd worked with the United States.
Yeah.
And so you gave them like a kill list.
Exactly. And what you have too is, there was an article about it. One of the main individuals that the United States is relying on in the past month for intelligence on the Taliban or what was going on and what was happening is someone who is on the U.S.'s most wanted list as a terrorist. I mean, again, where is this? Where is any human sense, common sense, whatever? I will tell you this. I mean, again, I do give Joe Biden credit for the fact that he stuck to his guns. He was the person in the Obama administration that said we should get out, decided we were going to get out. But I will tell you, once that decision was made, both the execution on the ground there by the military folks and the execution here in America by his message senders and his message shapers has just been incredibly bad. I mean, I just laugh because their whole thing, like everything else, he stood there, he said, the buck stop. He revised the Truman saying, the buck stops here. It's now the buck stops here, comma, but here's who's to blame. And that's not leadership. And he likes to say, well, it was the Trump administration that struck this deal with the Taliban. And there's truth to that. But just like everything else, you're the new president. You're certainly entitled to do things that would reflect what you believe and do it better as you believe it. He had no problems going against the Trump policy on the Keystone Pipeline. He immediately changed that policy, killed a few tens of thousands of jobs and killed our energy independence. He had no problem on the Kyoto Treaty going against what Trump said. He had no problem on the border going against what Trump said. But for some reason, their argument now is, well, we were locked into this agreement with the Taliban and we didn't want to go against it. All of a sudden, the Taliban is someone you don't want to upset. I mean, again, I just say, if Joe Biden doesn't fire some of his generals, he should be fired.
Well, in addition to that kill list that we talked about, you also have a lot of military equipment that got left behind. A tremendous amount of military equipment that got left behind, mm-hmm. And you've got also now, what the United States had gone into Afghanistan is, was to take away a safe harbor for terrorists to go out and plan attacks. And now what he's done is he's essentially given them an entire country, right, from which to go plan attacks.
And we have short memories in the United States, extremely short memories. We went to Afghanistan and everybody's like, oh, what were we doing there and everything else. We went to Afghanistan because they provided safe harbor to the Taliban, to ISIS, to Al-Qaeda. They provided safe harbor training camps, a launching place, safe harbor to harbor their fugitives and their terrorists. And so because that country provided that, we went in to get to the root of it and get rid of it. Now, you can have the argument that it's not an argument. We successfully did that. And then somehow it morphed into nation building, which is a whole nother historical argument that you can have of whether that was a good idea or a bad idea. But that's why we went there in the first place. 20 years later, we're right back to where we started. And there are thousands of American lives that have been lost. There's, you mentioned all of the hardware that's there. And let's remember something, and I'm not belittling people here, okay? But these folks that are the Taliban, I don't see them getting into a Black Hawk helicopter and figuring out how to fly that sucker, okay? I think they're sitting there and they may not know how to use this equipment because it is state-of-the-art high technology, but I can tell you they know how to sell that equipment to people like China and Russia that are interested in it. And so it wouldn't be a surprise to see that stuff show up someplace else with more of our adversaries that the United States taxpayers just paid for. Again, you have to ask the question, what were you thinking in terms of not making that decision to get out, but the plan to get out, how you did that? What were you thinking when you decide to announce it, you start to leave, before you pull your military assets, expose your people to a deadline as to when things were going to happen? As you mentioned, turn over a list of people that you want to get out of the country to your enemy. Where, again, I go back to, where is any sense whatsoever of the execution of this thing?
Well, and the other thing too is, what's the message given to not just in Afghanistan but around the world? When Joe Biden said, to those that had that had planned and carried out this attack at the airport, that the United States would go and find and hunt them down and make them pay for it. But most of the people that we would depend on to give us information, they're either dead, will be dead, or why would they even give out any information, knowing that we're just going to cut and run? And
Right.
it's not just here in Afghanistan. You look at it around the world. Is what kind of trusted partner is the United States? And I was listening to the Prime Minister of Britain say that at this point in time, he doesn't think he can get anything past, if the United States were in a conflict, he doesn't think he can get anything past Parliament to go and aid the United States or be a partner with them. And he goes, and we've been partners together since 1917,
Right.
since the First World War.
No, the one that cracked me up was Angela Merkel from Germany. Everybody talked. It's funny because it wasn't too long ago we were having a discussion on this podcast about the G7, G8, G9, whatever it is, and all of the European leaders and Joe Biden having a love fest and everything else. Angela Merkel, who hated Donald Trump, and he didn't like her much either. It was pretty clear, but she hated Donald Trump. Comes out and says, this is turning your back. How are we ever going to trust the United States again? And those are valid questions, because again, you made a policy decision, okay, but the execution of it that leaves military assets, human capital, military personnel so exposed, so vulnerable, so chaotic, is just someone looks at it and says, what these guys don't know what they're doing. That's why I think if Joe Biden has any hope of regaining any credibility whatsoever, he has to look at this and say, the people that I had directing the execution of the plan for withdrawal didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't execute it properly, and we need to make some changes. If he doesn't do that, I really do think his presidency is over on this thing.
Well, and let's carry it forward. I know right now we've got a recall election happening here in 14 days, but staying on this subject, what does this do for the Democrats moving forward in 2022 when you've got the Senate and the House up for grabs? I'm going to, you make the assumption, and I know one of the other things is like, you can cast your bet here, but I don't see the situation getting any better. I think the situation and the stories of whether it's more bombings, people getting beaten, people getting arrested or killed, or I hope that none of that happens. But with the people you're dealing with, is the situation in Afghanistan just going to get itself worse? And what does it do? Because it's hard to get rid of those images that we see.
Oh, seeing those people drop off of the airplane. And you see them running into the tuck under the wing. We should be better than that. We should be able to do better than that. That's my thing. It's like, we're supposed to be the United States of America, the strongest military force, yada, yada, yada. And our commander-in-chief puts us in a situation where that's where we're down to. People trying to escape for their lives fall to their death under the wing of an airplane that's taking off. And to your point, Hector, I think what you're going to see now is you're going to start seeing the one-on-one stories. You're going to start seeing the personal stories of people who did get out, and the trials and the effort that it took, and the humiliation and the threat and the danger that they faced in getting out after being supportive of the American effort there, what they had to do to get out, what they left behind, who they left behind, and what's going to happen to those people that are left behind. I think that's the next wave of stories that you start to see. And I think it's almost a bipartisan thing. You see Democrats, certainly not Nancy Pelosi, but some of her caucus that are not happy with this kind of situation. Again, not the policy decision, but the execution of it. It was really, truly stunning how bad it was done, how haphazard it was done, how poorly it was executed. And I think, and honestly, I think it really does hurt. I don't know what difference it makes in 14 days here. Um, there are pockets of large Afghan populations here in California, but it certainly, I think, is going to play very heavily in 2022.
Well, we
And
go. Yeah.
I was just going to say, and the other part about this that we haven't talked about is his partner.
I was just
I was
just
gonna
going to
get
go
my
there.
milk carton and see if I think I got her picture on my milk carton. Have you seen Kamala Harris lately?
Well,
Other than
that's where I was going to
reprising
go
the
with the.
Men in Black screen that they had there with her and the general and Blinken, and they were all dressed in black and everything else. It's like, what is this? But of course, she didn't say anything there. I mean, she still, all she has said, which was, again, and I posted this on Facebook, it would be comical if it wasn't so sad, is where she said there was going to be a robust review of everything. And all I could think of is, there was a whole episode on Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus on the word robust and how it was used as basically a BS line. And it's like, lady, you just walked right into that one too. I just don't understand. We talked about this before, how the first female vice president, champion of women's rights, champion of women being able to do everything they want to do, champion of women saying everything they want to say and getting the education they want, can sit silent and watch as a whole generation of women are now going to be under the thumb of the Taliban. That's incredible.
Well, that was my the good part of what happened this past week, because
Oh,
in the sense of the good part that happened this week is, Kamala Harris didn't end up making a trip for California. She canceled her trip. I know she was supposed to go out there and campaign for Gavin Newsom. They were supposed to have like a car parade in the Bay Area, and she didn't end up doing it. I think that was a smart move on her part, because the last thing she wanted to do was come here. And there's a very large Afghani population in the Bay Area. There's also a very large Afghani population in Sacramento. There was already rumblings that there would be protests at that rally, and so I think it was a smart move on her part just to cancel it out. It would have come off as being insensitive. It would have come off as being tone deaf. And I know you've heard rumors out there that that Biden may still come out, or
I would. Football season's coming, and so the betting line is now open. I would put money on the yes factor that Joe Biden will be out in California before September 14th. I think he is going to come out. I agree with you 100%. I was amazed that she still went to Singapore and Vietnam while all of this was going on. It really says volumes when you're facing this situation where you send your vice president, 10,000 miles away. And she goes to Vietnam, and for the purpose of announcing that the United States, in our generosity, is giving 1 million COVID tests to the government of Vietnam. And the day she does that, China announces they're giving them 2 million COVID tests. Again, another PR disaster. But why they would send her or let her go was mind-boggling to me. I will tell you, from a public relations standpoint, the videos they had of the president up at Camp, I mean, that was another part of this. He's up at Camp David. He's sitting in the Situation Room at Camp David by himself. There's no one there. I mean, she should have been there with him. That would have looked better, would have been better. And then he, gets on Air Force One, gets on Marine One, comes down to DC, makes his speech, screws up a few questions, calls on people looking at his script. Well, it says here that I have to call on Kelly O'Donnell from NBC News. It's like, dude, you're not supposed to read the directions part. We all do that in the public relations world. You say, okay, this is the person you want to call because it's going to be a fairly easy question. But the principal's not supposed to read the directions. They're just supposed to do it. It would have been, but then he gets through with that and he gets back on Marine One. He goes back up to Camp David. And that to me was mind-boggling as well from the standpoint of public image. So,
but he's coming out I don't know. I think the problem that I'm having with this entire situation is we've got a commander in chief that is just looking more frail and more weak, with policies that are just making the country seem more weak and frail.
Well,
Then you've got what's supposed to be your partner, because that's what the vice president is. The vice president
right.
handles a lot of the tasks or other tasks to kind of reinforce the administration and their messaging. But you've got a vice president that's 10,000 miles away, goes to Singapore and Vietnam, as you mentioned, but just remains silent, is not there helping out, is not there providing any type of assistance, is not there doing the Sunday rounds, because this is one of the things that they wanted to do, is they wanted to get, okay, Joe Biden the elder, more years on him. Then you've got someone who's young, who
and is
has
very
been great on
articulate.
camera.
She's
Yeah, has been
very
great on
articulate. I mean,
camera.
she is very good on, you may not like her message,
District
but
attorney. Yeah.
she's very good on message. You may disagree with it, but she's very good on message. Why do you take that person out of play and put them 10,000 miles away when you're in a crisis like this? It makes no sense. And it's not like not going to Singapore, not going to Vietnam is going to be some kind of huge diplomatic or United States disaster. You have a critical situation taking place where American lives, civilian lives, American military lives, and the lives of foreigners that have put their life on the line for your country is out there. And so why you have your number two out 10,000 miles away, that raises a lot of questions. That really does raise a lot of questions. To me, it made no sense. Because like you said, Kamala is a very articulate, convincing, can get on message and stay on message. And they needed someone like her because Joe Biden wasn't going to do that.
Well, yeah, and you look at her. She was a district attorney over in San Francisco, California. Top cop, and being California's top cop, there was a lot of questions she got. A lot of things that got posed to her, a lot of things she was able to respond with. At the same time, you've got someone who's commanded the press in what is considered the second largest media market in the nation. New York being the top one, but here in Los Angeles, she's accustomed to being on the shows and answering questions. And the only thing I can come up with or kind of think about is, you've got someone who's your number two, who's supposed to be your partner in crime there, who's supposed to be your partner to help you through all these things, who has decided that she's just going to kind of distance herself from this particular issue and let poor Joe kind of handle it himself, and fall back and forth on this issue as opposed to actually doing something with it.
Maybe it's a payback for being sent down to Central America. Who knows? He sent her down to deal with the border crisis that he created with his policies, and she's like, "Okay, Joe, you handle this one. I'm going to Vietnam and Singapore. I'm heading out of town." It doesn't make sense. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, you look at this in any president. I mean, if that had happened under the Trump administration, you can bet bottom dollar Mike Pence would have been there. If that had happened under Barack Obama's administration, you can bet bottom dollar Joe Biden would have been there. So and if it happened under George W. Bush's administration, it'd probably be George Bush there along with Dick Cheney. So it didn't make it logically, politically, it didn't make any sense that she'd be 10,000 miles away. And so it's going to raise questions amongst people, especially with Biden's performance. I mean, there were times when I was watching him over the last 2 weeks where it was painful to watch because he has a message and he can't deliver it. And he just starts going off track on things. And he says, okay, I'm told I'm supposed to call on Kelly O'Donnell. And it's cringeworthy. It really is. And when you have someone that makes a good presentation and be a good communicator for the administration, and you put him 10,000 miles away, it makes you wonder what's going on back there.
Well, and the other thing it's done too is I saw there was a new ad that came out from the Trump administration. Or the Trump
I didn't
campaign.
know they had one. Oh, the Trump campaign. Okay, good. I was going to say, because if they got rid of the administration or they still have the administration and didn't tell me, I'm going to be pretty pissed.
Yeah. No, they've got the Trump campaign, which seems like it runs like it's an official thing. But yeah, they put out an ad. Yeah, they put out an ad out there, pretty hard-hitting ad on Joe Biden, and it makes you wonder because Trump has been out there, toying with the idea of whether he would make a second run at this. I believe there's only one of the president who's actually done that, who's gotten beaten and then came back to win a second term. And
Really?
so
I didn't know that.
yep. And so the thing is that Trump's looking a bit wiser now, or seems like what, at least I got this one right. And look at poor Joe here, and like I said, he's got this ad which will end up playing it here, so people can see it or people can listen to it if you're listening to the podcast.
Well, it was a good ad, and I mean, I will tell you, it's certainly for the magnitude of the failure of this thing really does open the door for him if he's interested in doing it. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think you could say whatever you want, and there are those people that will not admit it, and that's fine. But there's no way that this kind of thing would have happened with Trump there. We may have ended up in a war there. We may have ended up dropping nuclear weapons or something, but there's no way we would be running out of that country with our tail between our legs, with leaving people behind that we said we were going to bring with us. That, watching American soldiers get blown up, watching people just fall out of airplanes because they're trying to get out, and the chaos that ensued, the craziness of having someone who's on America's most wanted list for terrorism as a person that's providing you with intelligence on the ground for the American troops. All of that stuff is just plain nuts. No other word for it. It's not Democrat or Republican. It's just plain nuts. And so I think it does open a door for him in all of this. 2024 is still a ways down the road. I think the real price to pay politically anyway is going to come next November in 2022. Because I think this was an offense. The whole thing was an offense to a whole lot of Americans, regardless of their party affiliation.
Well, and with such tight margins between the Senate and the House and the Senate, if they end up losing that little margin that they've got, which is really just the vice president there,
right.
You cast a deciding vote in the Senate, but end up losing the House, then really Joe Biden's administration and the things he wanted to get done just goes out the door.
Right.
Because
who's not going to happen. I mean, and that's why I think they've been so hectic and rushed in everything that they've done, because they recognize they have a window. Even before this happened, they have a window to get all of the things done, all of the progressive things that Bernie and others wanted to get done. They have a window to get it done, and so they've moved with speed on that, which I think politically was smart, strategically. But I think that's over now too, because you do have a lot of Democrats that are looking at this, and you have a lot of members of Congress who are Democrats as well as Republicans that are Afghan veterans. They're veterans of the war, and again, unfortunately, it's no longer about the policy. People keep arguing, well, why were we there, and all this other, why did we stay, yada yada yada. That's water under the bridge. That's in the rearview mirror. The point is, how did we leave? And we left with our tails between our legs, running and leaving behind our own people, putting our soldiers at risk, and putting people at risk that came to our aid when we needed it on the ground. It's a huge black eye for It's a huge black eye for America, and it's incredibly sad because 13 souls have been lost they weren't old enough to be able to legally drink. Okay, I mean, that's how young these guys were, and the women as well. That's how young they were, and their whole life is gone because of incompetence and because of poor leadership.
Let's stay on this. Let's stay on this topic of poor leadership. You've got the recall happening in just it looks like under
almost 14 days,
2 weeks now, and in these 2 weeks, you've got what has been a sprint now. You've got ads coming out in every whether it's on social media, on television, on cable. You've got the governor of California that's running a little scared, but at the same time, the ballot returns are looking good for him. You've got a majority, more than a majority of all those ballots that have been turned in have been by Democrats. You've got about 22%. Was it 22% coming in from Republicans?
24 Republicans, 22 independent, declined to states.
Yeah, and the majority coming in from Democrats. And so, is it looking good here for Mike?
Well, if you go by, and this is one of the things I've always found interesting, coming from a state which was in Rhode Island, we had 13% registered Republicans. And we won Republican governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, Congress, United States senator, because we recognized that people's voter registration was just one part of them, that there are other things like issues and things they're passionate about that supersede their voter registration card. So yes, 54% of the cards of the ballots returned to Democrats. But if you take a look just at one poll that was done that said, I think 23% of Democrats support the recall. So, if you take even 15% of that 54 and say, those are Democrats supporting the recall, on the Republican side, it's going to be high. I don't know of a single Republican that says they're voting against the recall. They may be voting for different candidates, but they're not voting against the recall. But even if you say 90% of Republicans that have returned ballots are voting for the recall, and the independents, you split 50-50, it's still almost dead even with those kind of percentages and those numbers. He's in trouble because it's if this was an ordinary election, he'd be running the standard playbook. Larry Elder's the front runner. You go out and you attack Larry Elder. And as a result, Larry Elder would go down, you would go up. The problem is he's not running against Larry Elder. He's running against himself. And he can't get away from that. And that's the problem that he has. And he's had it from day one. And he's going to have it right up until 8 o'clock on September 14th when I think we have a new governor. I don't know who it's going to be. But I definitely think that if Republicans keep showing up and independents and those Democrats that just look at it and say, it's again, in his case, it's not just the policy, it's the arrogance and the way he's conducted himself is really what pushed people over the edge. And the I know better than you know kind of attitude and the do as I say, not as I do attitude. I think that's what pushed people over the edge, and it's really tough to get him back after you do that.
So what's your thoughts? What do you think he needs to do between now and election day? Right now he's got his candidate that he's running against. He seems all guns are focused on Larry Elder. His ads are against Larry Elder, saying that he's the reincarnation of Trump, but a worse state. He's trying to bring out folks from D.C. or these high-profile people, but obviously, as we just talked about, Kamala Harris' situation didn't work out. But he's got Elizabeth Warren that's done an ad for him, and that's gone around quite a bit. You've got Bernie Sanders that is out there doing stuff over for him.
Like those people that Bernie and Warren appeal to were ever going to vote for a Larry Elder or a Kevin Faulconer. I mean, these are people that are. I mean, the world could be on fire and they would still be voting Democrat. I mean, I used to live in a neighborhood back in Providence, was the same way. It's like nothing's going to change their mind. In the same way there are people on the other side that nothing's ever going to change their mind. I'll answer your question, what I think, and then I want to hear what you should think. I think the first thing he has to do is his mechanics. There hasn't been a great turnout so far on the ballots. He needs to do everything he needs to do with all of the unions that have supported him to make sure every one of those people vote his way. That's number one. But in messaging, and I don't think he would ever do this, but I think he needs to do something where forget all of the fancy stuff and forget all the attacks. He needs to look in the camera and say, you know what, California, I heard you. We've been through some tough times. I've made some good decisions. I've made some bad decisions. But the one thing I feel most bad about is the fact that, you felt I didn't care. Some of you felt I didn't care. And I want to let you know I've heard you on that. And going forward, if I'm honored to be able to continue in this, I'm going to put all my resources and everything I have to make up that trust. I think he needs to address it directly. I think that's where he is right now. Would he ever do it? No, because you have to admit that you've had failure. But I've worked with a couple of candidates, and I've worked with one especially that had some things that are that are way more challenging, let's say, than what this guy is going through. And he won election about 4 times, and that is a tactic that will work if it's sincere. I had another one that I remember did that kind of commercial, and I remember him saying, "If you think I've done something wrong, then I'm sorry." And it's like, wow, I remember I used to say that when my mom and dad were mad at me. I'd say, "Oh, Mom, did I do something wrong?" And she'd look at me and say, "Well, if I did anything wrong, I'm really sorry about that." And that's when the frying pan would come next. But it's just, I think it's going to take something like that. Again, his biggest issue is not Larry Elder or Kevin. It's himself. He's got to deal with that, but he won't, because I don't think he would, because there's that arrogance there. What do you think?
I think he's got to do the mechanic part. I think he's got to do. The Democrats for such a long time have been good on the ballot harvesting programs. They've got the unions, which has got they can get millions of walkers out there. They get 1 million ballots in by just getting their walkers out there. Knocking on doors on doors from 9 in the morning to 5 or 6 p.m., then hitting the phones back up to make sure people are turning in their ballots. They've got the infrastructure, and Lord knows, we've looked through the campaign financing money. They've got well over $50 million to be able to get all this thing done. And with that army that he can put out there, that should, if executed well, that should be able to get him over the threshold that he needs in order to win re-election. But for a lot of these folks, there just hasn't been an appetite, or whether it's the is this thing real? Is this thing going to continue on? Who are we really fighting against, and all that other stuff? And it seems as though everyone's still waiting to see that big infrastructure or that big movement out there.
Right.
And so, because I'm getting calls from reporters just saying, "Hey, what are you hearing out there? Do you see people precinct walking? Are you seeing people going out and knocking on doors or doing other things?" And obviously, with this COVID situation, where people who are vaccinated are catching the Delta virus, catching the virus, there's fear all over the place of should I open up my door or not?
Well, that goes to something we talked about over and over, which is, where's the passion in this campaign? And people have so much of an attention span on things, and right now, and I think for the foreseeable future, the next 2 weeks, you've got now Afghanistan and everything that's happened there, and the aftermath of that. And God forbid anything worse that happens, like it happened the other day with bombings, whether it's in Afghanistan or someplace else. You've got the fires. Lake Tahoe is being evacuated as we speak, or parts of it. You have towns that were incinerated in a day. You've got the drought, you've got crime, you've got COVID, you've got the Delta variant, which is causing all of the expectation of things coming back to normal. And, somewhere in all of this mess, there's this recall. And so that's a lot of big stuff for people to deal with. The ones that are able to deal or compartmentalize and put all of that aside and still say, I'm really focused on one thing, and that's the recall, are the passionate ones that support the recall. The passion is not with the people or the groups to keep Gavin Newsom. They can be distracted to other places of big things that are happening. But the passion with those that support the recall is there no matter what else happens. That's what they're going to focus on. And that's another problem he has. The passion is with the people that are for the recall. And I think the other part too, and I want to go out and say this, is that you're right about the Democrats. They are experts at ballot harvesting. They are experts at putting people on the street. But I will tell you that, because I get all of the California GOP stuff, they're also doing, I think, a very amazing job as a small organization of trying to make a difference in that regard. And they don't have to match them point for point. They'll never be able to do that with the resources the other side has. But if they can mitigate them to even a small percentage of what they ordinarily would do on the Democrat side, that's going to help put yes on the recall over the top as well.
And I
Good for
think
them for
a lot
doing
of
that.
credit goes over to the chairwoman,
Absolutely.
Jessica Milan Patterson, who started from grassroots, walking precincts, making phone calls herself, and
Right.
has just kind of worked her way up, and is now the chairman of the California Republican Party. And that emphasis on doing on the ground work and doing really the nuts and bolts of a campaign, while at the same time going out there and raising money.
Right.
A lot of credit to her and that operation. But you are right;
And that's the
it's something
difference
that
between talking about it and doing. Look, both of us have been in so many campaigns, it's not funny. And you hear people talk about that element all the time, all the time, all the time. And then
or
they
do a
never do
PowerPoint
any.
presentation.
Yeah. They do a presentation. Here's what you do, and da da da, and then nothing else happens. At least with her and the team that she's put together, they're actually doing something. Is it as big as or strong as what the Democrats do? No, because they do it professionally. They do it with people that get paid money to do other things. They're doing it in a much smaller but equally, I think, effective way. And it will make a difference. I really believe that. It will make a difference.
Yep. Well, we'll see. I know we'll be getting together pretty soon to do another one of these podcasts, and as we kind of get together, we'll kind of update the folks as to what's happening with this recall, more money spent, some of these ads, and other things happening around the world, and hopefully, prayers and go to not just the firefighters who are out there. I mean, working. I mean, really, just all hours of the night, day, just to try to stop some of these fires and multiple fires happening, but to the families who've lost everyone, and
Yeah.
also to the Marines and their families who.
I was just going to say that. For those of you that are listening, I don't care what side you're on, whether you like us, don't like us, don't believe us. Everybody should say a prayer for those families of those soldiers that were lost over in Afghanistan. Their lives that are lost, and they should not be forgotten.
Yep. So we'll end, Mike. We'll end it there, and we'll get together soon.
Sounds good.
Great catching up with you.
All right. Take care. See you later, everybody.